It's interesting in learning about the history of America. We take for granted that we don't have child labor in this country, but it's a relatively recent idea. The protections that we take for granted now in the United States started 100 years ago, but they were ruled unconstitutional. Very interesting. And it wasn't until the Depression that it seems no-brainer restrictions that we have on the misuse of children in the workforce, became law. And even in the United States, we today have exemptions for things like agricultural work. I was shocked to discover that this problem exists in the United States. What's interesting about our Nobel Prize winner is that in addition to being a truly great human being, he's one of the 2 Nobel Prize winners in the Peace Prize from India, and he's often compared to the other, Mother Teresa. That's what it takes, I think, to serve the world in the way that you have. And I thought it'd be very interesting to talk about what the problem is, how we address it, what Google can do to help, and all of that. There is one thing that Google can do to help, which I don't think you know, which is that as of this very moment, we're announcing a $150,000 donation to your charity to help this in India and elsewhere.
Oh, wow.
so congratulations. And that's a donation from google.org to sort of help along. Just the organization that we know and we've worked with that you've built is fantastic. So maybe we could start by, you're probably the leader in fighting against child exploitation, child slavery, all of that sort of stuff, I think for your whole adult life. Maybe you can define the problem, how big is it, where are the pitfalls, those sorts of things.
Thank you. And once again, I will thank you for this new announcement as a surprise. Thanks. We live in a world of high-speed internet and globalization of technology and science, information, knowledge, products, markets. And partly you should be credited for that, the Google and Google's people, in building up a global knowledge village. But on the other hand, we still have 168 million children in full-time jobs. 85 million of them are living and working in most appalling conditions, what we call the worst forms of child labor under the UN law. 5.5 million children are slaves virtually, those who cannot move, those who cannot change their jobs and forced to work. And most of the cases, they are confined to workplaces, in mines, in quarries, at brick kilns, factories, workshops, houses, restaurants, and so on. Children are sold and bought like animals. If you allow, I will tell you a short story. Some years ago, we were organizing a march against child trafficking for forced labor or slavery. The South Asian march involving India, Pakistan, Nepalese children. And after the day-long awareness activities, we were just relaxing after dinner. And I saw that a group of children were sitting and talking among each other, Indian, Pakistani, Nepali, Bangladeshi. And one of them asked to other that, do you have any idea how much money you have been sold for? A girl said, I can't recall, but maybe 5,000 rupees. That is something around $80 or so. Then others, two other children replied, oh, we are even lucky that we have been sold for 7,000 rupees, a little more than $100. And then another girl stood up and said, Oh, I am even better because I have been sold many years ago for 10,000 rupees. And then one of the boys stood up and asked to four of them that, can you recall, do you have any idea that how much is the price of a buffalo in your country or a cow? The buffalo was quite common in South Asia. And they looked at each other. And then one of them replied, maybe 50,000 rupees. Another said, no, in my country it's about 100,000 rupees. I was listening and I was in tears. What are we talking about? These children are comparing with buffalo and cows. The buffalo is sold for 100,000 rupees and a girl for 10,000 rupees, 10 times is the buffalo's cost. We are not talking about medieval age slavery. We are talking about the modern age slavery.
I think maybe everyone is having the same reaction. How is this possible today?
It is the reality, and I would say that the saddest commentary on modern times in one sentence is that child slavery still exists. And this is possible because we don't have enough political will to control the systems. It is also because of the social mindset which does not recognize and respect the childhood, dignity of childhood and dignity of children. So social customs and so on, cultural problems. Also, we have not been able to invest adequate for our children. Look, only $18 billion additional funding is needed annually to bring all children to school and educate. And that is less than a week's military expenditure of the world. We are not so poor, but even then, we are not able to invest enough on our children, on their health, on their protection. We don't have protective systems. That is also a problem. So there's a combination of these things keep on working.
But there's a whole convention. There's a set of laws. There's something called the International Labor Organization and rules. America, for example, with the exception of agriculture, has rules where you can't be employed below 12. At 14 you can, but with certain restrictions. At 16 you can, but with some restrictions around danger. And at 18 you're considered an adult. And I think that conforms roughly with the rules. Is the problem that they signed the law and then they don't implement it, or did they just not sign the law?
Most of them signed the laws. 179 countries globally have ratified the Convention on Worst Forms of Child Labor. That means no child shall be allowed to work in hazardous occupations and worst forms up to the age of 18. But despite that, it goes on. As I said, 85 million children are the victims of worst forms of child labor. So one thing is moral and legal accountability. Another thing is the serious amount of political will, which is lacking. And thirdly, strong civil society, because the politicians act when there is a demand from their voters or from the communities and societies. And these children whom we are talking about are neither the voters or nor they can influence the politics of any country. So that's why it is very, very important that the voices, strong voices, should come in favor of children, because children are not able to speak for themselves. They are most invisible, most, ignored and neglected. Civil society is not so cohesive and strong that can speak with one voice and hold the government accountable. Also the businesses accountable, because businesses also have very strong role to play, especially when it comes to the supply chain. Most of the products are now which we are using, right from apparel to shoes and many more things, are produced by children in different parts of the world by the suppliers and the local subcontractors, petty contractors. So more transparency, more accountability in the entire supply chain, and the global business is equally needed. So the combination of those things are missing.
You know, you created this Save the Children movement, and you're credited with saving somewhere between 60 and 100,000 children from this sort of thing in India, and with many hundreds of villages that you worked. What did you actually do to make this happen? Was it speaking? Was it visiting? Was it how did you do it?
Every day when I come to my office in South Delhi, in Kalkaji, almost every day, I find one at least, but sometimes more, parents are sitting and waiting for my people and me to help. Whose children are missing, whose children are trafficked and sold. They could not trace those children. And they have no hope because they cannot easily go to the police. The poor people in most of the developing countries don't have faith in police, number one, and no confidence in police. Anyway, so they keep on waiting. So what we do on the basis of that, we do thorough investigation about the clues they give and the knowledge they give. Then we engage different authorities, police, magistrate, the labor department. It is not so easy to coordinate with different agencies, but we had to. And then we conduct a secret rescue operations. In that operation, we don't inform anyone, even don't inform the police the exact location. We say that in that area, these children are confined in the factory or a mine, because it's always risky. I lost 2 of my colleagues. One was shot dead, one was beaten to death.
Really?
Yeah, and I have my left foot broken, my leg broken, my right arm, my right shoulder is broken, my backbone has a lot of bruises and scars, my head has scars. So these people are very strong people, mafia, and if they come to know in advance that we are going to rescue children, then they prepare with arms and become violent. So we have to be very, very, very careful and very swift and secret to go and do the rescue operations. And then
Sorry, so you literally go in
we literally,
and rescue the child.
thousands of times. I have gone personally thousands of times. I could not recall how many times in last 35 years. But right from the beginning, I go and my colleagues go. And earlier, the police was not so involved. But later on, when the High Court and the Supreme Court of India became quite proactive and started directing the authorities and police to help and to go in these rescue operations, only then they started going. So when we free the children back, there are a lot of legal formalities in terms of handing them over to the parents. And then we bring those children for our rehabilitation centers. My Indian organization runs 3 rehabilitation centers, 1 for girls and 2 for boys. And these children stay there, and we try to restore their childhood and sense of freedom. But more importantly, we build their self-esteem so some of them can become the leaders and liberators for themselves. Some of my children came to address the UN General Assembly side meetings. Some of them have addressed the Senate and congressional hearings in DC. Some of them have addressed the European Parliament. So they have proven that if they are given the chance and opportunities, they are no less than anyone in the world. And they have shown their leadership skills.
And what happens to the people who would enslave them?
We have strict laws on slavery and human trafficking. So sometimes the problem is that the civil society organizations have no idea, and sometimes they don't have capacity to use the laws because, first of all, it is very risky. If you go against those mafias legally, the softer approach is just to take the help of authorities and go and convince and take the children out and send them back home. That is not enough. But in my case, our organization has been working for the enactment of laws, for the enforcement of laws, because if we rescue these children under the proper laws, they would be entitled for the rehabilitation facilities and the governments, and the employers would be arrested. Of course, in many cases, employers run away. We cannot find them when we go for rescue operations. But sometimes they are caught sooner or later. and then they are arrested. Of course, it's very cumbersome, very expensive process to follow the legal case in the court, and they are rich and powerful people. They can go to higher court and then higher court. So it's difficult, but at least there is some deterrent in it.
Now, is every one of these children illiterate, essentially? They've not been to school?
Some of them have been to school. Many of them have never been to school. Some of them are registered in schools, but they don't attend the school. For instance, last year, we have rescued 1,100 children from Delhi itself, from the capital of India, with the help of judiciary and police in these rescue operations. And 850 out of them were enrolled in their native villages, in their schools. That means they were attending. All the datas which were prepared was that these children were in schools, they were receiving a stipend and other facilities of the government, and the local government furnishes that information to Indian Parliament, and the Indian government furnishes that information to UNESCO and other UN agencies. So they were attending those things on paper, but they were enslaved and they were trafficked. So many of these children are removed from schools with the pretext of better life and better living, working conditions, and so on. These traffickers are quite smart people. They move around, they identify certain areas, they engage the local agents, sub-agents, and they successfully bring the children and sell them out to different places, including for child marriages or brothels or other places.
Yeah, the obvious question here is how much of this is sexual exploitation of young men and women, boys and girls, and how much of it is other forms of abuse?
The sexual abuse goes beyond the child labor or child slavery or trafficking issue, because sexual abuse may occur inside the families by some of the distant relatives or in neighborhood, schools also sometimes. It is not very uncommon in many of the developing countries, the sexual abuse in different forms. But when it comes to the slavery and child labor, though commercial sexual exploitation or child prostitution is a very, very heinous crime. What else could be worse than that? Sexual slavery for children. But when we compare with the rest of the exploitative forms of child labor and child slavery, it's a small segment. I'm talking about 168 million children in full-time jobs, where a few million children are the victims of child sexual exploitation as child slaves. But the newer forms are evolving, like the pornography. The children are being used for the pornographic purposes, knowingly or unknowingly. They have no awareness how they would be used by this small smartphone. People who are carrying a smartphone, they take the pictures, they change the photo, and then blackmail the young girls. And that has become quite common using this modern technology. So the awareness among the youth and children in schools and colleges is very less, that how to get rid of these blackmailers and the people who can manipulate their pictures and so on. Also, the tracking about such people is equally important, and how to address this problem with the service providers, for instance, both in case of the phone companies as well as the websites and other social media. These things are new challenges in the exploitation of children in modern times.
It's important to address it.
Yeah.
You're here in New York to visit with the United Nations, I believe. Tell us, how do you actually do this at scale? I understand you go in and you rescue a child, very dangerous and so forth, but with 168 million children in this kind of situation, you need a scalable approach. What's the best way to start this? You're talking to the UN now about this, right?
Yeah. I have been to UN several times, not the first time. I realized right from the beginning that rescuing 1 or 10 or 100 or 1,000 children is not enough. When I started in 1981, after giving up my career as an electrical engineer, it was very hard. Many of you must be engineers. And those days, we did not have the software engineering or the computer sciences, so I did not go to that course. So the most advanced was electrical engineering, and one has to secure very, very good marks to get admission in electrical engineering those days, 40 years ago or so. Anyway, so those days, we did not have any law in India. The United Nations systems did not have any international convention on rights of children. It came into being only in 1989 when UN Convention on the Rights of the Children was adopted by the international community. So it was a hard time. But I realized that we have to fight for laws. Without that, we cannot. So we fought for it in 1985. We succeeded. In 86, there was a new law in India. The first time the Indian law against child labor has been enacted. We knew it. Then we tried to link this whole issue with education. Right from the beginning, I was advocating that eradication of child labor and education for children are the two sides of same coin. We have to ensure that the government have good policies, good programs, good investment on education for children as preventive measures as well as rehabilitative measures. Then we realized that it is not an Indian problem because many of the multinational companies are operating in India or the products made in India are sold in other parts of the world. The global policies, political policies and economic policies are also affecting children in different parts of the world. So I had an idea to launch a worldwide movement against child labor with a clear demand that international community should adopt a new international law on worst forms of child labor. In 1989, we organized a worldwide march, Global March Against Child Labor, which went across 103 countries. We have covered 80,000 kilometer distance, which is double than the periphery of the earth. And 71 heads of the nations, presidents, prime ministers, kings and queens joined or supported it. It has resulted in the international legislation, which we are talking about now, this worst forms of child labor law. Similarly, we realized that I realized that I am freeing 10 children, but another 20 or 30 children are entering into slavery, trafficked to work in carpet industry in India. And I trusted in the power of human compassion. So, and everybody has some element of humanity. That was my belief. 90% of the carpets produced in India and 95% those days produced in Pakistan and Nepal, they were sold to United States and Germany and other European countries. So an idea cropped up in my mind that why should I not go to the consumers and launch a campaign to educate them? Not to call for boycott of South Asian carpets, but with an alternate, with a solution. Because I always believe in solutions. Problems, one can talk hours and hours and days and months. It's very easy to talk about the problems, but sometimes difficult. But solution is must. So I brought an idea that let us evolve a social monitoring and labeling mechanism through proper inspection, transparent and professional inspection mechanism, running numbers of the carpet, the code numbers and so on, which can guarantee that this particular rug is free of child labor in South Asia. So that was the first social labeling introduced when the this phrase corporate social responsibility was not coined. It was not invented. Before CSR, we had a successful story to tell about the carpet industry. And the number of child laborers, according to various studies, including the US Department of Labor, those days in mid-90s, was 1 million in India, Pakistan, and Nepal. And the latest figures suggest that it is no more than 200,000. So there was a significant decrease in the number of child laborers in carpet industry, and as a result, we can find job opportunities to 800,000 adult people in place of children because the quantity of carpet did not fall down. It is even more. So many more adults could be replaced, could find job in place of children. So that was one thing.
So when you talk, it sounds like this problem, and you've done your work in India, but it must be a pretty global problem. So it's a problem in India, it's a problem in Southern Asia, it's a problem in Pakistan. Where else is it a problem?
It's a global problem. As you mentioned, that there's a problem in United States as well. In the West Coast, we have children, Hispanic children still working in agriculture farms and other places, and sweatshops also in some places. I have been working, I started in India, then I realized that it's a South Asian issue, so I started working in Pakistan, Nepal, and Bangladesh. And then after the Global March in 1998, we built a worldwide platform or worldwide coalition of civil society organizations, teachers' unions, trade unions, some of the businesses, and brought them in one platform, that is Global March Against Child Labor. We kept the name intact. So we work in more than 100 countries practically now. We have our regional offices and coordinators in South Africa, Central Africa, East Africa, similarly southern part of America and Central America and North America, similarly in Asia, South Asia and Southeast Asia, Europe. So we work through 2,000 partners across 144 countries to be precise, but some of them are dormant, not so active, but about 100 countries are active where we can raise the collective voice.
So I think what we should do is we should go to the questions from the audience, and we also have an internal system which we call Dory, which has already submitted a few questions.
Yeah, sure.
So I'll ask the first question, and maybe we can have people who have comments or questions come to the microphones. First question on the Dory is, in India, we often see children from poor backgrounds working in roadside shops, factories, and mines. They and their parents often support this, saying that if their children don't work, they won't have enough money to eat food. What is your answer to this argument?
First of all, the children who are working in street restaurants or whatever mines, they are not responsible for poverty. Somebody else is responsible. This is the moral issue. Who will take the responsibility of poverty? Why children should take the responsibility on their shoulders to carry it on? And they will remain poor for whole of their life. They will remain illiterate. They will remain sick while working as child. This is moral. But the economic argument is that globally we have 168 million children, as I said, in full-time jobs, and 200 million adults are jobless. There are many studies in several countries which have proven that there is a parallel between adult unemployment and child labor. And also, most of these children who are working are the very children of those parents who don't find jobs for more than 100 days a year. So that becomes a vicious circle. Children are preferred in jobs because they are the cheapest source of labor, or sometimes free labor if they are bonded labor. Adults have to be paid more money. Adults would work only 8 hours or 10 hours. Children are going to work for 14 hours, 18 hours. They will sleep and work in those small restaurants, street-side restaurants, but the adults won't. So we have to break this vicious circle, and that understanding has to be broadened and deepened.
Obviously, educating them will also help, right? Because they will become more educated adults and have higher paying jobs and all of that.
Absolutely. We are living in the age of knowledge economy now. We cannot think of any sort of social justice. We cannot think of economic growth of a society or getting rid of personal poverty without education. And not only education, good quality education is must. And access to the most advanced knowledge is must to be empowered and to be the equal partners in the globalization.
Our first question.
Hi, thank you for coming. As consumers who maybe don't know a whole lot about this issue or don't know where to find out information, what do you think that we can do in terms of voting with our dollars or any other, can you just look at a tag on a piece of clothing or a sticker on an item and know whether or not it was made with child labor?
Well, this is a very, very important question. I tried to find answer at least in rug industry with this label. So if you go to buy a carpet, which is not so often, you don't go to buy a carpet every day, but definitely the people go to buy shoes and clothes quite often, or the sporting goods or toys for the children. Unfortunately, there is no credible labeling system of certification so far. One of my future objective is to introduce not exactly the same child labor free label, but some sort of child friendly labeling system where the companies who are committed to certain things, certain criteria, including no child labor, zero tolerance to exploitation of children, helping in education, helping in healthcare for children, and also involving in engaging supply chain, building capacity and holding the supply chain accountable. Then we can think of introducing some sort of certification or some labeling where the people can get something better, not with 100% guarantee that there's no child labor involved, but if the processes are properly controlled, then more chances that there is no child labor. Because when we go to do the inspection at ground, we need hundreds of thousands of inspectors. For garment industry alone, garment industry is some of the very common thing, and which highly depend on supply chain and the local subcontractors. So you need a parallel inspection system than the government inspection system. So we have to see that how we can hold the government inspectorate system more accountable and more active rather than creating a parallel system. But those companies who pledge to take certain measures, and we can check those measures time to time, we can think of some label, some sort of label of being child-friendly, thing like.
Another question we have from our remote audience: how can individuals get involved in fighting for children's rights? In other words, obviously people care about this. How do they make a difference?
First of all, everybody has to be friendly to his or own child. Spend some time. We are all busy with our own careers and our own lives. Start with home. Start with oneself. Be friendly to your brothers and sisters. If you are living with them, it's fine. Otherwise, you can use the modern techniques. The Google is here. So you are the people who can do some Google Talk or whatever. So that is another possibility. But spend some time, be friendly, respect them, listen to the children. That could be the beginning. And then the second thing is that you are connected with the ocean of knowledge. And once you get to know that in some place, somewhere, there's a systemic violation of child rights and the children are denied childhood, you can simply react to it by just pushing some of your fingers on your computer, on your mobile phone. Raise voice, break the silence. By taking simple measures, you can be the part of bringing about the change in the life of those children and creating more child-friendly world and respecting child rights. Some of you or many of you can really help in devising new apps or new ways which can be very helpful to connect to the people in terms of awareness building, in terms of engaging the young people like him who is asking what to do. One can put some timber on a Google app. You can create some app through Android or whatever. And I can't do it, actually. I have my limitations because those days there was nothing like...
You are an electrical engineer.
Yeah, but
we expect you to be a programmer.
So, but I have my own limits, and you guys are not only sitting on the ocean of knowledge and creating ocean, but you are the brightest brains actually in the world. I am sitting and feeling so delighted amidst you as the brightest brains who can bring about a lot of changes in the world through technology and through information technology in particular, in creating new ways of engaging people, giving them a feeling that they are also partners of change by just clicking some button. They can stand for the rights of children or something like that. I don't know. But that I leave up to you to think you have a lot of innovation programs, and I'm so curious to do something. I highly depend on Google. Let me tell you, Eric, one thing. that the day when the Nobel Peace Prize was announced, I was on my computer and Googling one thing. I was trying to find a cheaper ticket for me to visit to Germany because so I thought that the Google is the right answer to find me a cheap ticket to visit Germany. And suddenly, and I found some good answers. Then suddenly, some journalist called me up. He was an Indian journalist. It was daytime. And he said, Kailash ji, Nobel Prize. G is it's some sort of respect, to pay some respect, you add G. So Kailash ji, Nobel Prize. He was so excited because I was the first Indian-born Indian to receive the Nobel Prize. And I was standing in the league of Mother Teresa. So he was so excited. So he said half sentence. So I thought that he's asking for some response or some reaction from me. Somebody might have got the Nobel Peace Prize. And I thought that it might have been declared in the morning. So I thought the best way to find is the Google. I shifted myself from one Google search and opened the new window for another Google search. I don't want to miss my cheap ticket. So I was looking, and I started Googling. But I was a little upset, frankly speaking, because I was just printing Nobel Peace Prize 2015. And that time it was appearing 2014. And it was a matter of few seconds. It was not even 1 minute, actually. He got the message because it was being announced. It was still going on in Norway. And this journalist was fast. And I was a little upset that I always try to find answers to every single question, right from my health to my acidity to everything through Google. And I could not find answer to give it to this journalist who got the Nobel Peace Prize. And you were clever. Within no time, it appeared on your screen. And also some of my friends came from downstairs in my office and hugging and kissing. But it was there in few seconds.
This is why we work at Google, guys. This is it.
This is why I'm sitting here and wanted to work more with Google.
And I'm so happy you were able to simultaneously be awarded the Nobel Peace Prize and get a cheap ticket using Chrome. Okay, go ahead.
You had mentioned that child exploitation is a global problem, obviously. But I think there's this notion that, well, it happens in India, Pakistan, maybe Nigeria, elsewhere. How much of a problem is it here in the United States? And is it happening, right outside our door?
As mentioned before, that many of the children who are working in tomato or potato farms, many of the children who are working in orange farms in the West Coast, some of them or many of them are Hispanic, they are Haitian, they are Mexican children, and their passports are controlled by their contractors and so on. So they are working as child laborers in this country. But you cannot compare the problem with the children in South Sudan or children in Pakistan or some parts of India, children in Afghanistan. Those who are the victims of multiple problems, they have to face systemic violence, societal violence, economic violence, and so many other things, sexual violence. And so that is the problem. But we know that in sub-Saharan African countries, this problem is more acute. In South Asia, also serious problem, but little bit improvement. In Central America, we have some problems, a different kind of problems. Like in Central America, the problem of commercial sexual exploitation, child prostitution below the age of 18, girls are being used for this prostitution. This is a serious problem. In Southeast Asia, the sexual exploitation is another serious problem in comparison to forced labor. South Asia, forced labor, or traditional labor, where the children are born and grew up in those families where the parents or grandparents have borrowed money from the grandparents of the landlords in the agriculture sector or the stone miners. That is a serious problem, what you call the intergenerational slavery or intergenerational bonded labor system. So it varies from place to place because of the traditions, also because of the structures of the societies and so on.
As I mentioned, in the U.S., there's an agricultural carve-out for this. The stepstones are no labor below 12, 14, 16, and 18 in the U.S., but there are exemptions in agriculture. And there's a set of people who are, for example, trying to stop children working on tobacco farms because of the exposure to carcinogens and so forth. Obviously, an issue for adults as well. It strikes me as this is just a bug. This needs to get fixed. We should not. There's no scenario in the U.S. where we need to allow this sort of thing. It must be a holdover from an ancient time. Yes, ma'am.
You mentioned in a lot of, or at least in the carpet industry, a lot of the buyers were foreign, and I imagine it's similar for especially garments and other things. And I was wondering if the countries that are probably importing a lot of these goods made with illegal labor, if they've taken any measures to bar the import of goods with kind of questionable origins, and if so, have those been successful or not? Or there's probably barriers to doing this that I'm too naive to think of right now, and I was just kind of wondering if there's been any success or what the situation is from a policy perspective from the countries that are importing these goods.
Yeah, at least in United States, there is a specific law to deal with the forced labor, child labor, and bonded labor. And the Department of Labor produces a frequent report. It's, I think, 4-yearly or 3-yearly report, which is brought, and they name the industries and countries which involve child labor and try to negotiate and pressurize the countries of import as well as the industries. But the blanket ban on any industry or any country is not going to solve the problem. There are other ways to deal with it. As I mentioned before, that how to engage the suppliers and supply chain, how to create more protective environment for children, how to invest more on education for children in those communities, how to raise the consciousness in the communities itself, because communities and parents themselves could be the best protector of those children. They can be involved in it, which is normally not done. So awareness building and consciousness raising, engagement of suppliers and the subcontractors, building their capacities, sensitizing them is important. Equally important to form the multi-stakeholders initiative where the governments, if possible, but the businesses, the civil society organizations, community organizations, religious groups, the teachers, the faith leaders can come together and help in finding the solution. And of course, the representatives of the subcontractors and suppliers should also be brought into account so that everybody can work hand in hand. So wherever we have been able to find some sort of multi-stakeholders initiative, we have seen some positive results, but that has to trickle down at local level. It should not remain an international stakeholders initiative. It should go down at district level or state level, country level. And that process this is not just one go thing. It's an ongoing process for education and making the people responsible and eventually accountable.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Yes, go ahead.
You spoke briefly before about deterrents that are in place. I was hoping you could elaborate a little bit more about the deterrents in place where you think they might be falling short on the social, economic, legal levels, and looking at it not just from within Southeast Asian countries, globally, but the local levels like you were just mentioning.
Actually, the laws are important, but they are like the tools or the weapons. Somebody should use those tools at right time, right place. And that education and that capacity is needed when we talk of law. Then the more important is creating awareness in the society and holding the stakeholders more morally accountable and socially accountable. The accountability is something which is missing. And accountability should be evolved as a culture, not just as an imposition, legal imposition that you have to show it. A combination of both would be the best ideal situation, where the businesses and other institutions, including the government, should be held accountable if they are not properly enforcing their laws. But on the other hand, everybody should feel morally accountable. I think the moral accountability is most effective and sustainable than any other legal system.
Thank you. Why don't we have our last two questions right here on the left? Go ahead.
Sure. You mentioned that one of the reasons that child labor is favored, obviously, is that it's much cheaper. Children will work for much longer days, whereas an adult might only work for 8 hours a day or something like that. So there's a clear economic incentive. Do you think that part of the problem might be overregulation of adult labor? That's clearly a very tough position to take, but at the same time, there must be some way that we can make the economic incentive of choosing child labor less favorable for those companies. So do you think it's in deregulation of other types of labor, or do you think there's other ways to close the gap of making the incentive less?
Actually, using child labor is illegal in most countries. So when they go for employing child labor, they already do some illegal activity. But by way of employing children, they can save a lot of money as black money. On paper, most of these people spend 30, 40, 50% of the production cost as labor cost. That is shown on paper. But practically, they spend only 2-3% by feeding them or keeping them. Sometimes, if they give a pittance, it go up to 5% of the total production cost, the labor component. But rest of the money goes as black money. And that black money propels corruption and breaking the laws. So the people keep on breaking the laws. On the other hand, the labor laws are not really so deterrent in most of the countries. In case of agricultural labor, across the globe, but mainly in developing countries, not properly implemented in agriculture sector, no labor law properly. Like the minimum wage. Minimum wage and safety measures, they are not enforced. So it is also a big challenge that how the very basic labor laws in relation to minimum wage and protection of workers is properly enforced, which is not yet done. Only a few % of people are unionized, those who can fight, and they are clever to fight for much better conditions, much better wages, and so on. But the rest of the people who are not unionized yet and living in informal or unorganized sector, they are not even getting the benefits of the existing laws. More important is to implement, first of all, have good laws in relation to child labor and an effective implementation. And secondly, investment on education as preventive measures. The answer lies in education, basically.
And
Thank you.
okay. And why don't you have the last question?
Sorry. I was just wondering on, you mentioned about how you save all these children from slavery, and also measures on how to get buyers to stop buying the carpet to prevent the income. But where do these children go? Because their families are still in poverty. They still have to work. Is there any measures to take care of, make sure they get educated instead? Where does the money come from?
Yeah. There are many social protection programs for children in many countries. For instance, in India, we have very strong measures for rehabilitation of children who are freed from bonded labor. That is the part of legal system. In Brazil, we have very strong laws. In Philippines, there are some strong schemes for that. There are many countries. So those schemes have to be properly enforced. That is, again, a challenge. Also, because of weak coordination among agencies, also because of weak civil society or incapable civil society to raise their voice strongly. It goes on. No accountability. In case of carpet you raised, I did not call for the total boycott of South Asian carpets. I called for a child labor-free carpet. So the people should demand child labor-free carpet. Calling for boycott of anything is easy thing, but it did not work anywhere in the world on any issue because people eventually need those things. If I call for boycott of, say, apparels or shoes, it's not going to work. Maybe some people sentimentally or emotionally, ideally, they can be engaged for a few days or few months or few years, but eventually they will go to buy the products. So I was proposing that consumers should demand a child labor-free carpet. And I have to find the answer. Of course, I took advice from many good minds that how we can evolve a full-fledged monitoring and labeling system so that consumers can find the solution. These children who were withdrawn, they created jobs for adult people. And the adult people were not imported from other countries. All those adult people were found locally. And they could find the jobs. So the parents were able to get better employment opportunities in place of children. And these children went to school. If they are not working as child laborers and there's no other job opportunities for them in that local area of carpet production, then they have gone to school. And we did regular follow-up. We have devised certain databases, certain tracking systems in most of the children whom we free, right from their identification and rescue operations to legal actions to rehabilitation and education follow-up and so on. That is also not enough. And that's why in the future I would love to learn and take advice and cooperation from Google to help us in devising more concrete tracking systems, monitoring systems, beside some kind of app of engaging people, which I was suggesting before, could be opportunities.
So as you know, we have had some meetings with you today to talk about this precisely. But what I would say is that you were very kind in your description of us, but I think you are the one who has courage. I think you can see what it takes, to change the world in a way you have. I think we admire you. We admire what you did personally, the risks you've taken, and the many, many things you will do for the next decades in saving children. Thank you very much for being here.
Thank you. My pleasure and my honor. Thank you very much.